19 million years ago, something happened in the open ocean that scientists still cannot explain. Up to 90% of all open ocean sharks disappeared, not during the extinction that killed the dinosaurs, not during a known volcanic catastrophe, not during a major climate collapse. They were simply gone. The evidence comes from deep Pacific sediments, where shark scales suddenly become rare, dropping from abundance to near absence in a geological instant. Whatever caused it erased one of the most successful groups of predators on Earth and left almost no trace behind. What makes that mystery so unsettling is who the victims were. Sharks survived the asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs. They survived the Great Dying, when almost all life in the ocean vanished. They survived environmental disasters that destroyed entire branches of the tree of life. Yet some of the strangest sharks ever created disappeared forever. One species carried a spiral of 180 interlocking teeth inside its jaw, a living buzzsaw unlike anything before or since. Another spent millions of years hunting in freshwater rivers and coal swamps before vanishing without a successor. Others were so bizarre that scientists spent decades arguing over which end of the animal they were even looking at. The sharks that survived became the ancestors of the great whites, hammerheads, and whale sharks we know today. But they were not the original version of shark evolution. They were what remained after several worlds had already been lost. Today, we're exploring the extinct sharks that pushed evolution to its limits, and the catastrophes that erased them. Now, let's descend into the oceans that existed before the ones we know. For all the animals that once ruled vanished oceans, for every impossible jaw, spine, and body plan scattered through stone, nearly all of what remains can fit in the palm of a hand. A tooth, a grain-sized scale, a fragment of a creature that spent its life moving through water and left almost nothing behind. The reason rests deep within the structure of a shark itself. Unlike most vertebrates, sharks are not built from bone. Their skeletons are formed primarily from cartilage, a flexible material that grants strength without the weight of a rigid frame. In life, it is an elegant solution. In death, it is almost a disappearance. Bone can persist long enough to become mineralized, preserving a record for distant ages. Cartilage rarely receives that opportunity. It decays, collapses, and returns to the environment that shaped it. What survives is usually something harder. Teeth endure. They settle into mud, sink into seabeds, become buried beneath layers of sediment, and sometimes remain there for hundreds of millions of years. Yet even teeth tell only part of the story. A predator may have carried thousands of them across its lifetime, replacing them again and again, while the rest of the body dissolved completely. This creates an unusual view of the past. Imagine attempting to reconstruct an entire forest from scattered leaves, while every trunk, branch, and root has vanished. That is often the challenge faced by those studying ancient sharks. Each fossilized tooth offers a glimpse, but the animal attached to it frequently remains hidden behind immense stretches of time. There is another source of evidence, far smaller and in many ways even more valuable. The skin of a shark is covered in structures called denticles. They resemble tiny teeth, each one formed from the same basic materials as the larger teeth lining the jaws. Covering the body in vast numbers, these microscopic scales shape the flow of water across the animal's surface. Throughout a shark's life, denticles are continually shed. One falls away, another takes its place. The process repeats endlessly as years pass above the seafloor. Eventually, those denticles descend into ancient sediment. Layer after layer accumulates. Mud settles, minerals drift through water, time presses downward. Long after the animal itself has vanished, countless denticles remain embedded within the record of the ocean floor. Under magnification, they become traces of populations, communities, and entire ecosystems. Their shapes differ subtly from one lineage to another, allowing scientists to follow patterns of diversity across spans of time almost beyond comprehension. Through these tiny remnants, an extraordinary truth emerges. Sharks are older than trees. The first forests would not spread across land until much later. Sharks are older than the Atlantic Ocean, which opened long after their lineage was already ancient. They are older than most mountain ranges visible today. They are older than dinosaurs by roughly 230 million years. Across that immense duration, continents drifted, seas opened and closed, climates transformed repeatedly, entire groups of animals rose to dominance and disappeared. Yet sharks remained, not unchanged, but continuous. At least 5 great extinction events swept across the history of life. Oceans lost entire communities. Dominant species vanished. Ecological foundations collapsed and rebuilt themselves into unfamiliar forms. Sharks passed through each catastrophe and entered the world that followed. What endured was never identical to what existed before. Every survival carried a cost. Certain lineages vanished forever. Certain anatomical possibilities ended with the animals that embodied them. The survivors continued onward, but the lost designs did not return. The fossil record of sharks is therefore not merely a record of persistence. It is a record of absence, written in teeth and denticles scattered through stone, preserving fragments of worlds that no longer exist. And among those fragments, the first recognizable shark begins to emerge from the waters of the Devonian. Long before familiar coastlines, before forests cast shadows across land, a sleek hunter moved through Devonian waters that already carried the rhythms of pursuit and escape. The world was different in almost every visible way, yet this animal possessed a form that feels unexpectedly recognizable across the gulf of time. Among the scattered traces preserved from that distant age, Cladoslache stands as the earliest creature in the fossil record that can be recognized as a true shark. It was not enormous. Most individuals reached lengths of roughly 1.8 meters, which is about 5.9 miles. Its body was narrow and streamlined, shaped like a living dart. A deeply forked tail swept behind it, built not for sudden ambush, but for sustained speed. Everything about its outline suggests motion, a predator designed to cross water efficiently rather than linger within it. One feature set it apart from nearly every shark that would follow. Modern sharks wear a covering of denticles that roughen the skin at microscopic scales, creating surfaces refined by immense spans of evolution. Cladocellaceae carried almost none of them. Its body was nearly bare. Small scales appeared only around the mouth, near the eyes, and along the edges of the fins. The rest of the skin remained remarkably smooth. Water flowed over that surface with minimal resistance, producing a degree of streamlining that later sharks never fully repeated. Much of what is known about this ancient animal comes from an extraordinary deposit now preserved within the Cleveland Shale of Ohio. Most cartilaginous fishes leave behind little more than teeth and fragments. Cladocellache was granted a rarer fate. Layers of sediment captured details that usually vanish long before fossilization can begin. Muscle fibers remained visible. Internal organs left impressions. Structures associated with the kidneys survived as faint records within stone. The result is less like finding a skeleton and more like discovering an echo of a living body preserved across hundreds of millions of years. These fossils reveal habits as well as anatomy. Within several specimens, The remains of prey still occupy the stomach region. Small fishes appear there whole, rather than torn apart. Many entered tail first. This detail carries an entire hunting strategy within it. Cladocelochi likely approached from behind at speed, overtaking prey and driving it forward into the mouth. Rather than relying on crushing force or complex manipulation, it transformed velocity into a feeding tool. Its mouth occupied an unusual position. In many modern sharks, the jaws sit beneath the snout, angled downward toward prey below. Cladocelochi carried its mouth at the very front of the head. The jaws faced directly ahead, reinforcing the image of an animal built for pursuit through open water. It met the world head-on, trading tight maneuverability for efficient forward movement. Even after more than a century of study, mysteries remain. Paleontologists have examined specimen after specimen, searching for claspers, the reproductive structures present in male sharks today. None have been found. The absence may reflect a genuinely different reproductive strategy, or it may simply be another detail that time chose not to preserve. The lives of these animals began somehow, generation after generation, yet the mechanism remains hidden behind the curtain of deep history. For all its elegance, Cladoceloche did not rule its ocean. It occupied a world where greater forces moved through the water, creatures whose presence shaped the behavior of everything around them. The speed, the streamlined body, the forward-facing mouth, all acquire a different meaning when viewed against the larger predators that shared the Devonian seas. Cladoceloche was not the master of that realm. It was one participant in a far older struggle, learning to survive beneath powers that would leave an even larger mark on the history of life. Predators leave signatures on the creatures that survive beside them. Sometimes those signatures appear as scars. Sometimes they appear as speed, shape, and instinct, carried across generations until they seem inseparable from the animal itself. In the late Devonian seas, one presence pressed itself across the lives of nearly everything around it. It was not a shark, nor a member of any group still swimming today. Its lineage belonged to an older chapter of vertebrate history, a branch that flourished for millions of years and then vanished completely. Among its ranks stood Dunkleosteus terrelli, one of the most formidable animals the oceans have ever produced. Its body reached lengths of roughly 8 to 10 meters, which is about 26 to 33 miles. The front half was enclosed within heavy armor formed from interlocking bony plates. These plates wrapped around the skull and upper body like a natural fortress. Behind that armored front, the body narrowed into a powerful swimming form capable of carrying tremendous mass through the water with surprising efficiency. The most remarkable feature was not the armor, but the mouth. Dunkleosteus possessed no true teeth. Instead, the edges of its jaws formed sharpened blades of bone. As the animal fed, these cutting surfaces continually wore against one another, maintaining edges capable of slicing through flesh, armor, and bone. When the jaws closed, the upper and lower blades met with extraordinary force. Estimates suggest a bite force approaching 80,000 newtons, among the most powerful ever calculated for any creature known from the fossil record. The strike itself unfolded with astonishing speed. Studies of jaw mechanics indicate that the mouth could open in roughly 1/50th of a second. As the jaws expanded, water rushed inward. The resulting suction pulled nearby prey toward the opening before escape movements could fully begin. In many encounters, the attack was already underway before the victim had crossed the brief distance between awareness and action. Evidence preserved within stone reveals that Dunkleosteus directed this power broadly. Some fossils bear bite marks matching the jaws of other Dunkleosteus individuals. These injuries appear on fully grown animals rather than juveniles, indicating encounters between adults. The pattern suggests cannibalism was not unusual within the species. Even members of its own kind existed within the range of potential prey. Other discoveries provide an equally revealing glimpse into its diet. Paleontologists have recovered fossilized masses of regurgitated material associated with Dunkleosteus remains. Within these compressed deposits lie fragments of animals that prove difficult to digest. Among them are the remains of early sharks. The evidence is direct and unmistakable. Sharks were not merely neighbors in the Devonian Ocean, they were food. Seen from this perspective, the anatomy of Cladocelush acquires a different character. The streamlined body, the nearly scale-free skin, the deeply forked tail, and the forward-facing mouth no longer appear as isolated features. They become pieces of a larger story. Speed mattered because something faster than hesitation lived nearby. Efficiency mattered because wasted movement carried consequences. Every refinement reflects a world shaped by the presence of animals, such as Dunkleosteus. For roughly 70 million years, placoderms occupied dominant positions throughout marine ecosystems. They influenced the paths available to other predators and helped define the conditions under which early sharks evolved. Then the pattern ended. The late Devonian extinction swept across the seas and erased every placoderm lineage. Not a few species, not a handful of branches, the entire group disappeared. The armored rulers of that ancient world left no descendants and no return. What remained was an ocean transformed by absence, a realm where pressures that had guided evolution for tens of millions of years had suddenly fallen away, leaving space for forms stranger than anything that had existed before. Before the extinction had a name, it arrived as a long unraveling. Not a single day, not a single impact, not one dramatic boundary etched neatly across stone. Instead, life entered a period of repeated losses, each wave carrying away more of the world than the one before. Beginning around 375 million years ago, Earth moved through a sequence of biological crises that stretched across roughly 25 million years. By the end, about 75% of all species had disappeared. The seas felt the change most deeply. Across ancient coastlines, entire communities that had flourished for millions of years began to contract. In some marine environments, the two most severe episodes, now known as the Kellwasser event and the Hangenberg event, may have eliminated as much as 97% of vertebrate species. The numbers are so large that they challenge imagination. Ecosystems that had once seemed permanent became fragile. Familiar relationships between predator and prey dissolved. Lineages that had survived countless generations suddenly approached their final chapters. The precise cause remains uncertain. The evidence points towards several possibilities, each immense enough to alter the course of life on a planetary scale. Volcanic activity may have released vast quantities of gases into the atmosphere, reshaping climate and ocean chemistry. Global cooling may have altered circulation patterns across the seas. Oxygen levels in large regions of the ocean may have fallen dramatically, creating conditions in which many animals could no longer survive. At the same time, the first great forests were spreading across the continents. Their roots transformed landscapes, their growth altered nutrient flows, and rivers carried increasing loads of organic material into coastal waters. Some researchers suggest these changes fueled immense blooms of microscopic life that consumed available oxygen as they decayed. Whatever combination of forces drove the crisis, the consequences reached nearly every corner of the marine world. Coral reef systems, among the richest habitats on Earth, suffered catastrophic collapse. These underwater cities had supported extraordinary diversity, providing shelter, feeding grounds, and breeding areas for countless species. When they fell apart, entire ecological networks fell with them. The loss was not brief. Reef ecosystems would require roughly 145 million years before recovering comparable complexity. The armored rulers of the Devonian did not survive the transition. For tens of millions of years, placoderms had occupied dominant positions throughout the oceans. Their influence extended through food webs and across continents. Yet when the extinction pulses ended, every placoderm lineage was gone. The disappearance was complete. No hidden population remained. No descendant carried their legacy into later ages. A group that had once seemed unshakable vanished entirely from the story of life. The oceans that remained afterward felt strangely open. Many shark lineages suffered severe losses as well. Numerous forms disappeared forever, joining the growing catalog of vanished experiments. Yet sharks as a whole endured. They crossed the boundary that placoderms could not. The survivors entered a transformed world, one stripped of many competitors and many predators that had shaped their evolution from the beginning. Looking back across the fossil record, paleontologist Lauren Salin of the University of Chicago described the Hangenberg crisis as an event that reset vertebrate diversity in every environment, both freshwater and marine, creating a completely different world. The phrase feels less like a metaphor than a literal observation. The biological rules that governed the Devonian no longer applied in the same way afterward. Absence became a creative force. The great armored hunters were gone. Reef systems lay diminished. Ecological spaces that had once been occupied for millions of years stood vacant. Evolution found itself working with unfamiliar possibilities, shaping survivors within landscapes that no longer resembled those of the past. When the Carboniferous period began around 359 million years ago, it inherited that emptiness. What emerged from it would later earn a remarkable title among paleontologists, the Golden Age of Sharks. Not because sharks had suddenly appeared, and not because they had become invincible, but because the world around them had been cleared of so many former constraints that evolution was free to explore possibilities it had never attempted before. Across the newly opened Carboniferous seas, evolution began sketching possibilities with unusual freedom. Lineages spread into habitats that had once been crowded. Forms appeared that seem less like variations on a familiar theme and more like entirely new ideas. Paleontologists would later describe this period as the Golden Age of Sharks, not because one design dominated, but because dozens emerged. At least 45 shark families appeared across these ages, each exploring a different answer to what a predator could become when older constraints had fallen away. Among the strangest was a shark called Orthacanthus. Its name means chest spine, though that description captures only a small part of its peculiarity. Orthacanthus inhabited ancient waters from roughly 382 million years ago until about 298 million years ago. Fossils have been discovered across North America, Europe, Asia, and Russia, making it one of the most geographically widespread sharks of its era. It was not especially large. Many species measured between 70 centimeters and 1.5 meters in length, which is about 2.3 feet to 4.9 feet. The largest known species, Orthacanthus productus, reached approximately 3 meters, which is about 9.8 feet. Yet size was never the feature that made this animal remarkable. At first glance, its silhouette appears almost familiar. Then the eye reaches the back. Where most sharks carry a conventional first dorsal fin, Orthacanthus possessed something entirely different. Rising from its back was a thick, horizontal structure shaped like a broad platform. Fossil evidence shows that this formation was rigid and flattened, resembling an anvil balanced atop the animal's body. Covering the upper surface were rows of enlarged tentacles, each one resembling a miniature tooth. They pointed forward in organized ranks, creating a textured field unlike anything seen in living sharks. The oddity did not end there. A matching patch of enlarged denticles occupied the top of the head. When the animal lifted its snout, the denticle field on the skull aligned with the denticle field on the dorsal structure behind it. The two surfaces faced one another like opposing brushes made from rows of tiny teeth. Seen in profile, the arrangement looks almost engineered, as though each component had been built specifically to interact with the other. For more than a century, researchers have debated why. One leading interpretation suggests that the structure played a role in reproduction. During mating, the dorsal platform and cranial denticles may have functioned together as a biological clasp. A male positioned beneath a female could potentially use the arrangement to maintain contact during courtship and reproduction. The geometry appears capable of supporting such a role, and the theory remains one of the most widely discussed explanations. Another possibility emerges when the animal is imagined from below. Viewed from beneath the water column, the opposing denticle fields may have resembled the open jaws of a much larger predator. The arrangement could have functioned as a display, transforming the shark's outline into something more intimidating than its actual size would suggest. In crowded ecosystems where appearances carried survival value, such a structure may have provided an advantage. Neither explanation has been conclusively proven. The mystery deepens because every confirmed specimen possessing the anvil structure appears to be male. Despite decades of study, no female Orthacanthus has been definitively identified. Some paleontologists have suggested that females may have looked so different from males that their fossils have been classified under entirely different names. If true, the species may have displayed one of the most extreme examples of anatomical difference between sexes known among ancient sharks. For millions of years, Orthacanthus persisted with its strange architecture intact. The structure clearly served a purpose, important enough to survive the pressures of natural selection across vast spans of time. Yet when the lineage eventually disappeared, the design vanished with it. Across the roughly 300 million years that followed, sharks evolved into countless forms. Bodies lengthened, jaws transformed, senses sharpened, and habitats expanded. But no later shark ever grew an anvil upon its back. The idea appeared once, flourished for an age, and then passed entirely into stone. In a limestone deposit beneath the plains of Montana, an ancient moment remained undisturbed for longer than the rise and fall of entire continents. Layer upon layer of sediment settled across a carboniferous sea, preserving creatures with a level of detail that paleontologists rarely encounter. The Bear Gulch Formation is among the most remarkable fossil archives on Earth, a place where bodies were recorded so carefully that fins, skin outlines, and delicate anatomical structures survived the passage of roughly 325 million years. Among those preserved animals was a shark called Falcatus. It was small, almost delicate by the standards of many ancient predators. Most individuals measured only about 25 to 30 centimeters in length, small enough to fit comfortably within two hands. Nothing about its size suggested that it would become one of the most puzzling sharks in the fossil record. Yet a single feature transformed its appearance into something entirely unlike any living shark. In mature males, a curved spine emerged from the body just behind the pectoral fins. Rather than pointing backward like a defensive structure, it swept forward in a graceful arc over the top of the head. The tip aimed toward the animal's own face, creating a profile that seems almost impossible at first glance. The spine was formed from the same mineralized cartilage as the rest of the skeleton, making it a natural extension of the body rather than an attached ornament. Females lacked the structure completely. So did juveniles. The spine appeared only when males reached sexual maturity, making it one of the clearest examples of a secondary sexual characteristic among ancient sharks. Its presence immediately suggested a role connected to reproduction, yet exactly how it functioned remains uncertain. The fossil record provides evidence of the structure itself, but its purpose remains hidden behind millions of years. Bear Gulch preserves an extraordinary clue. One specimen contains a male and female Falcatus positioned together in direct contact. The female's mouth rests against the curved cephalic spine of the male. The arrangement appears natural rather than accidental, as though the animals were engaged in a behavioral interaction at the moment they were buried. Paleontologists interpret the scene as courtship behavior, making it the only known direct fossil evidence of mating interaction among Carboniferous sharks. The image is remarkably intimate despite the immense age separating it from the present. Most fossils reveal anatomy. This specimen hints at behavior. It captures not merely what an animal looked like, but a fragment of how it may have lived. The mystery deepens when the spine is considered from an engineering perspective. Water rewards streamlined forms. Even small irregularities can influence movement through the surrounding current. A forward curving structure projecting over the head would seem likely to create drag. It may also have interfered with portions of the animal's upward field of vision, yet Falcatus retained this feature across millions of years of evolution. Natural selection is generally unforgiving toward costly structures that provide little benefit. The persistence of the cephalic spine suggests that whatever advantage it offered outweighed any disadvantages it created. Reproductive success may have been important enough to justify the unusual design. If the spine played a role in courtship, mate recognition, or physical contact between males and females, its value may have extended far beyond simple hydrodynamics. Bear Gulch fossils provide unusually rich evidence for studying these possibilities. Skin impressions survive in some specimens. Fin shapes remain visible. In certain cases, enough detail exists to reconstruct the full body outline with considerable confidence. As a result, Falcatus is anatomically better understood than many other Carboniferous sharks known from the same period. Paradoxically, greater knowledge has not produced greater certainty. The body is familiar, the spine is obvious, the fossils are exceptionally preserved, yet the reason for such a remarkable structure remains elusive. Millions of years passed, with Falcatus carrying its curved crest through ancient seas, and then the lineage disappeared during the Permian-Triassic extinction. Across roughly 250 million years of shark evolution afterward, countless forms emerged and vanished. Bodies changed, fins shifted, jaws diversified. But no shark ever grew another forward arching spine above its own head. The design belonged entirely to Falcatus, and when the animal passed from the world, the idea departed with it. Some animals are known from entire skeletons. Others leave behind trackways, skin impressions, or traces of behavior. Edestus entrusted almost its entire story to its teeth. From the closing chapters of the Carboniferous period, roughly 306 million to 299 million years ago, this remarkable predator emerged in the fossil record, carrying one of the most unusual feeding structures ever produced by a vertebrate. The largest known species, Edestus giganteus, reached lengths of approximately 6 meters, which is about 19.7 feet, and may have weighed close to 2 tons. Its body was substantial, powerful, and clearly suited to active predation. Yet the feature that transformed Edestus into a paleontological puzzle was concentrated entirely within its jaws. The scientific evidence for Edestus giganteus is surprisingly limited. The only complete specimen consists of a jaw fragment discovered in a coal mine in western Kentucky. That fragment measures roughly 46 centimeters, which is about 1.5 feet in length, and carries serrated teeth approximately 5 centimeters long, which is about 2 inches. From such remains, paleontologists have reconstructed an animal unlike anything alive today. Modern sharks replace their teeth continuously. New teeth develop behind older ones and gradually move forward. Worn teeth fall away and are discarded, creating a conveyor of replacement that operates throughout the animal's life. Edestus followed a different path. Its teeth were never shed. New teeth formed at the rear of the jaw, but the older teeth remained in place. As growth continued, the entire dental series advanced forward together. Each generation of teeth pushed the previous generation outward, preserving a complete record of the animal's dental history within the mouth itself. The result was extraordinary. Both the upper and lower jaws developed elongated, curving arcs of accumulated teeth. The oldest teeth occupied the leading edge. The newest remained closer to the rear. Rather than forming a compact biting surface, the jaws projected outward as paired rows of serrated blades. Seen in reconstruction, the arrangement resembles enormous shears. For decades, paleontologists debated how such a mouth could function. The geometry seemed awkward when compared with the familiar mechanics of sharks and other predatory fishes. The teeth did not meet in the manner expected of a conventional bite. Their arrangement suggested a feeding strategy unlike anything observed in modern oceans. Important clues emerged through microscopic analysis. Paleontologist Wayne Itano examined wear patterns on Edestus teeth and discovered scratch marks oriented in a direction opposite to what would be expected if the upper and lower teeth simply pressed together. In animals whose teeth meet directly during biting, wear tends to follow predictable paths. Edestus displayed something entirely different. The scratches indicated motion across prey rather than straightforward compression. From this evidence emerged a striking interpretation. Edestus may not have seized prey and held it in place through biting force alone. Instead, it likely drove its open jaws into flesh and then moved its head sideways. The curved dental arcs would have functioned as cutting surfaces, slicing through tissue in repeated lateral motions. Rather than puncturing and crushing, the animal may have carved. Each movement transformed the serrated teeth into active blades, working back and forth through prey in a manner with no known parallel among vertebrates. The rest of the body appears to have supported this unusual strategy. Reconstructions suggest a streamlined head shape reminiscent of fast-swimming marine predators. Combined with a body approaching 2 tons in mass, the animal possessed the power necessary to deliver and sustain these cutting strikes. Nothing about the design appears accidental. Every component seems connected to a highly specialized method of feeding. That specialization is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Edestus. Its jaws were not a strange experiment that briefly appeared and failed. The lineage persisted for millions of years, which means the strategy worked. It secured food, supported reproduction, and carried generations through changing environments. The fossil record preserves success rather than error. When Edestus eventually vanished near the end of the Carboniferous, the design vanished as well. No later shark developed the same forward-advancing dental architecture. No descendant inherited the giant scissor jaws. The entire concept disappeared with the animal that embodied it, leaving behind only a few fossil teeth and the enduring evidence that, for millions of years, a living chainsaw moved through ancient seas. The mystery began not in the ocean, but in stone. In the year 1899, Russian geologist Alexander Karpinsky examined a fossil discovered in what is now Kazakhstan. It did not resemble a jaw, a fin, a shell, or any familiar part of an animal. The object formed a perfect spiral, tightly coiled like a polished scroll. Its shape suggested something biological, yet its purpose seemed impossible to determine. The fossil appeared complete and incomplete at the same time, preserving exquisite detail while revealing almost nothing about the creature that carried it. Karpinsky gave the fossil a name, Helicoprion. He also produced the first reconstruction of the animal. Working with the evidence available at the time, he placed the spiral on the front of the snout, projecting outward like a horn. The interpretation was reasonable. Nothing else seemed to fit. Yet, as later generations would discover, the arrangement could not function in a living predator. The structure was real. Its placement was not. The puzzle persisted for more than a century. As additional fossils emerged, researchers repeatedly attempted to solve the problem. One reconstruction positioned the spiral along the upper jaw, another attached it beneath the lower lip. Some proposed that it extended from the dorsal fin. Others imagined it trailing from the tail. Each interpretation explained certain details while creating new impossibilities. The animal seemed trapped between competing theories, none entirely satisfying and none fully supported by the available evidence. What made the mystery especially difficult was the nature of cartilaginous fishes themselves. Their skeletons rarely survive fossilization intact. The spiral teeth endured. The surrounding anatomy usually did not. Scientists possessed the most unusual part of the animal, while lacking the framework needed to understand it. For generation after generation, Helicoprion remained one of paleontology's most enduring riddles. Then, in the year 2013, a breakthrough arrived through imaging technology unavailable to earlier researchers. Professor Leif Tapanila of Idaho State University and his colleagues applied computerized tomography scanning to exceptionally preserved fossils. Rather than examining only external surfaces, they were able to peer inside the stone and reconstruct the skull in 3 dimensions. The result transformed everything. The spiral had never projected outward at all. It sat entirely within the lower jaw, supported along the center line of the mouth. No horn emerged from the snout. No blade extended from the tail. The famous whorl was hidden inside the animal's own jaws, functioning as part of a feeding mechanism unlike any other known vertebrate. The structure itself was extraordinary. Some spirals reached diameters of roughly 30 centimeters, which is about 11.8 inches. Within a single whorl, as many as 180 teeth could be preserved. The smallest and oldest occupied the center. New teeth formed continuously and were added to the outer edge. Unlike modern sharks, which regularly shed worn teeth, Helicoprion retained every tooth it ever produced. The entire dental history of the animal remained permanently preserved within the growing spiral. The upper jaw contributed another surprise. It carried no teeth at all. Instead, the spiral operated against a toothless upper surface. During feeding, the lower jaw rotated upward, drawing the outer cutting edge of the whorl through prey. Soft-bodied animals, such as cephalopods, appear to have been particularly suitable targets. Rather than crushing or tearing, the mechanism sliced. Helicoprion itself was no minor curiosity, drifting through ancient seas. Estimates suggest lengths reaching approximately 7.5 meters, which is about 24.6 feet. It occupied the role of a major open ocean predator from roughly 290 million years ago until about 225 million years ago. During that span, it survived one of the most catastrophic biological crises in Earth's history, the Great Dying, and continued into the early Triassic world that followed. Even more surprising is its place within the family tree of cartilaginous fishes. Helicoprion was not a true shark. It belonged to a lineage more closely related to modern chimeras, gentle deep-water animals that bear little resemblance to the formidable predator represented by the fossil whorl. On a branch of evolution that would eventually produce some of the ocean's most unassuming fishes, nature briefly created a giant hunter armed with a rotating spiral of teeth. Across roughly 250 million years of evolution afterward, countless jaws emerged, diversified, and vanished, yet no lineage ever repeated the design. The spiral jaw of Helicoprion appeared once, endured for millions of years, and departed from the world without a successor. There are moments in Earth's history when the continuity of life narrows to a thread. The end of the Permian was one of those moments. Around 252 million years ago, the living world entered the most devastating biological crisis ever known. Later extinction events would become famous. Some would erase dinosaurs. Others would reshape oceans and continents. None approached the scale of what unfolded here. This was not merely a reduction in diversity. It was a collapse so profound that much of complex life came dangerously close to disappearing altogether. The losses spread across nearly every environment. In the oceans, approximately 96% of marine species vanished. On land, roughly 70% of vertebrate species disappeared. Entire groups that had endured for immense spans of time reached their final chapter. Trilobites, whose ancestors had survived countless environmental upheavals, vanished forever. Rugose corals disappeared from the seas. Blastoids followed them into extinction. Evolutionary lineages that had persisted for tens or hundreds of millions of years simply ended. The catastrophe began deep beneath what is now Siberia. An immense volcanic episode known as the Siberian Traps erupted across an area of roughly 2 million square kilometers, which is about 772,000 square miles. The eruptions continued for approximately 1 million years. Lava flooded across the landscape again and again, releasing enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. The consequences extended far beyond the volcanic region itself. Climate systems shifted, rainfall patterns changed. Acid rain fell across large portions of the planet. Ocean chemistry drifted away from the conditions that marine ecosystems had depended upon for millions of years. Temperatures climbed as greenhouse gases accumulated. In some regions, ocean temperatures may have increased by roughly 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, or 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Waters that had supported diverse communities became increasingly stressful environments. Species adapted to stable conditions found themselves confronting a world transforming around them. Then came another crisis, layered atop the first. Oxygen levels within large portions of the ocean began to decline. In many regions, seawater became severely depleted of the oxygen required by complex marine animals. Vast stretches of habitat transformed into environments that could no longer support the life they once contained. These oxygen-poor zones were not brief events measured in seasons or decades. Some persisted for hundreds of thousands of years. Across the marine world, ecosystems unraveled. Many of the extraordinary shark lineages that had flourished during the Carboniferous disappeared during this transition. The lineage of Orthacanthus ended. Falcatus vanished. Edestus disappeared. Freshwater xenocanthid sharks, once widespread across river systems and swamps, were reduced to scattered remnants. The remarkable diversity that had emerged after the Devonian extinction suffered another severe pruning. One survivor lingered longer than most. Helicoprion, carrying its remarkable spiral jaw through changing oceans, endured beyond the initial catastrophe. It crossed the boundary that eliminated many of its contemporaries and entered the early Triassic world that followed. Yet even this lineage eventually disappeared. The final representative of those great Carboniferous experiments passed away, and with it ended one of the most distinctive anatomical designs ever produced by cartilaginous fishes. The sharks that survived were generally different in character from those that vanished. They tended to be less specialized. Their diets were broader. Their ecological roles were more flexible. Among them were members of the Hybodont lineage and early relatives of the group that would eventually give rise to modern sharks. These animals were not necessarily superior predators. They were adaptable ones. That distinction mattered. The Great Dying did more than eliminate species. It erased possibilities. The anvil-backed body plan of Orthacanthus disappeared. The forward curving spine of Falcatus disappeared. The scissor jaws of Edestus disappeared. Each design depended on developmental pathways carried within living populations. Once those populations vanished, the instructions vanished with them. When life slowly rebuilt itself in the aftermath, evolution worked with what remained. New forms emerged. New predators appeared. Oceans filled once more with movement and competition. Yet certain ideas never returned. The pathways that had produced some of the strangest shark designs in history had been closed forever, and the world that emerged from the Great Dying was built from a smaller set of surviving blueprints. Not every shark responded to changing worlds by becoming faster, larger, or stranger. One lineage chose a different path entirely. Long before the Great Dying completed its transformation of life on Earth, a group of sharks abandoned the sea and entered environments that most of their relatives never truly claimed. Those environments stretched across the immense coal swamps of the Carboniferous and Permian periods. Rivers wound through forests, unlike anything alive today. Vast wetlands spread across low landscapes. Fallen vegetation accumulated in waterlogged basins that would one day become coal seams. Within these freshwater systems lived Orthacanthus, a member of the xenocanthid lineage and one of the most successful freshwater sharks in Earth's history. Orthacanthus appeared approximately 310 million years ago and persisted until roughly 225 million years ago. Its range extended across regions that would eventually become Europe and North America. For around 85 million years, generation after generation occupied rivers, lakes, swamps, and channels far removed from the open ocean where sharks had first evolved. Its body reflected that transition. Rather than the streamlined profile associated with pursuit hunters of the sea, Orthacanthus possessed a long, flexible form resembling an enormous aquatic ribbon. Large individuals reached lengths of approximately 3 meters, which is about 9.8 feet. A continuous fin extended from behind the dorsal region, flowed along the back, wrapped around the tail, and continued beneath the body. The arrangement produced a silhouette more reminiscent of an eel than a modern shark. Such a design was well suited to the environments it inhabited. Coal swamp waterways were often crowded with submerged roots, fallen trunks, dense vegetation, and narrow passages. High-speed pursuit across open water offered little advantage there. Flexibility mattered more. Orthacanthus could weave through obstacles, maneuver through confined channels, and navigate habitats that would have challenged more rigid predators. Another unusual feature rose from the back of its skull. A prominent spine projected upward and backward, forming one of the defining characteristics of the animal. The base of the structure was hollow in a manner consistent with possible attachment to venom-producing tissues. Some researchers have suggested that the spine may have delivered venom as a defensive weapon. Direct evidence confirming venom has never been discovered, yet the anatomy continues to invite investigation. Even after decades of study, the exact function remains uncertain. Its teeth were equally distinctive. Instead of the familiar triangular cutting teeth associated with many marine sharks, Orthacanthus possessed teeth with two major prongs. These projections angled in ways that improved gripping and tearing rather than slicing. Such dentition was effective for capturing the creatures that shared its freshwater world. Lungfish, early amphibians, and other river inhabitants likely formed important parts of its diet. The fossil record preserves evidence of behavior as well as anatomy. In deposits from what is now Nova Scotia, paleontologists discovered fossilized feces produced by Orthacanthus. Within these remains were teeth and bones belonging to juvenile members of the same species. The discovery provides direct physical evidence of cannibalism. Adult Orthacanthus occasionally consumed younger individuals, perhaps during periods when resources became scarce. Freshwater environments can fluctuate dramatically. Water levels fall, habitats shrink, competition intensifies. Under such conditions, even members of the same species may become potential prey. What makes Orthacanthus especially remarkable is not merely its anatomy, but its endurance. The lineage occupied freshwater ecosystems for approximately 85 million years. That span exceeds the existence of Megalodon. It also surpasses the duration of the entire age of dinosaurs. Through changing climates, shifting river systems, and ecological upheavals, Orthacanthus remained a successful predator of inland waters. Eventually, however, the world changed beyond recognition. As the Triassic period unfolded, many of the great coal swamp environments disappeared. River systems reorganized, ancient wetlands contracted. The ecological stage that had supported Orthacanthus for tens of millions of years gradually vanished. The shark disappeared with it. Since then, some sharks have ventured into freshwater. The bull shark can travel deep into rivers and survive far from the sea for extended periods. Yet these journeys remain temporary connections to a marine ancestry. No later shark lineage permanently colonized freshwater on the scale achieved by Orthacanthus. For 85 million years, it possessed an entire realm of rivers and swamps, and when that realm faded, no successor rebuilt it. Recovery rarely resembles the world that existed before disaster. When the Triassic period began, the oceans still carried the legacy of the Great Dying. Ecosystems had survived, but only barely. Waters remained warmer than many organisms had previously endured. Oxygen levels were often lower. Food webs that had once supported extraordinary diversity were reduced to simpler structures. Across vast stretches of time, measured not in centuries but in millions of years, marine life slowly rebuilt itself from what remained. The creatures participating in that reconstruction were, in many ways, less specialized than their predecessors. Many of the extravagant experiments of earlier ages had vanished. The unusual body plans that once populated rivers, reefs, and open seas were gone. In their place appeared animals built not around extreme specialization, but around flexibility. Survival favored designs capable of functioning across changing conditions, and few groups embodied that principle more effectively than the hybodont sharks. Throughout much of the Triassic and Jurassic periods, hybodonts became the dominant cartilaginous fishes of the world. Their success rested upon a remarkably practical innovation. Instead of relying on a single style of tooth, they carried two distinct types within the same jaw. At the front were sharp teeth, suited for seizing fish and other active prey. Farther back were broader, crushing teeth, capable of breaking shells and hard-bodied animals. This arrangement transformed dietary limitations into opportunities. A predator equipped for only one kind of prey becomes vulnerable when that resource declines. Hybodonts could shift between food sources with relative ease. Fish, crustaceans, shelled invertebrates, and numerous other animals could all contribute to their diet. In ecosystems still recovering from catastrophic losses, adaptability carried tremendous value. Among the best-known members of this group was Hybidus. Reaching lengths of approximately 2 meters, which is about 6.6 feet, Hybidus achieved a distribution that spanned the globe. Fossils have been discovered on every continent, evidence of a lineage comfortable across an extraordinary range of environments. Some individuals inhabited open marine settings, others frequented shallow coastal waters. Certain species even ventured into freshwater habitats, demonstrating ecological flexibility that echoed distant experiments from earlier ages while remaining firmly rooted in a more generalized body plan. Its appearance would seem familiar to modern eyes. The body was streamlined and robust. The proportions resembled those of many later sharks. Yet traces of older evolutionary traditions remained. In front of each dorsal fin stood a spine. These structures may have served defensive purposes, but many researchers suspect they also played a role in mating displays and interactions between individuals. Even within increasingly recognizable forms, evolution continued, exploring subtle variations. While hybodonts flourished, another lineage was beginning a much quieter ascent. The Neoselacians, ancestors of every living shark, ray, and skate, occupied relatively modest roles during much of the early Triassic. They were not yet the dominant force they would eventually become. For millions of years, they existed alongside other cartilaginous fishes, gradually refining characteristics that would later prove highly successful. Their advantages accumulated slowly. Sensory systems became increasingly sophisticated. The ability to detect movement, pressure changes, and electrical signals improved. Reproductive strategies became more efficient. Incremental changes, each seemingly modest on its own, combined over immense spans of time. Generation after generation, the lineage expanded its influence. Looking across the Triassic oceans reveals something deeper than the appearance of new species. The consequences of the Great Dying had become visible within the architecture of evolution itself. Life was rebuilding, but it was rebuilding along different pathways. The instructions that once produced the anvil-shaped structures of Orthacanthus no longer existed. The curved cranial spine of Falcatus no longer existed. The ribbon-shaped freshwater design of Orthacanthus no longer existed. Those possibilities had vanished with the lineages that carried them. What emerged instead moved steadily toward forms that would seem increasingly familiar. The Triassic and Jurassic worlds were not ages of stagnation. They were ages of assembly. Piece by piece, tooth by tooth, fin by fin, the modern shark body plan was taking shape. New experiments continued to appear, yet they belonged to a different chapter of the story. The oceans were no longer rebuilding the past. They were constructing a future whose outlines were beginning to resemble the living world. A map of the Cretaceous world would appear strangely unfamiliar. Coastlines occupied different positions. Continents had not yet completed their modern arrangement. Water covered immense regions that are now dry land. Across much of the planet, the sea extended far inland, transforming low-lying landscapes into shallow marine environments rich with life. The Earth of this period was a greenhouse world, warmer than today and marked by sea levels that stood roughly 100 to 200 meters higher than modern levels, which is about 328 to 656 feet higher. The result was an oceanic realm of extraordinary scale. Warm seas spread across broad portions of every continent. Sunlight penetrated vast, shallow waters, supporting ecosystems of remarkable productivity. Reptilian giants moved through these environments. Marine birds crossed open horizons. Countless fish species occupied every available layer of the water column. Among them lived sharks, whose diversity rivaled nearly any period in their history. One of the most remarkable settings existed in what is now North America. There, an immense inland sea divided the continent. Known as the Western Interior Seaway, it stretched from the Arctic region to the Gulf of Mexico. At some points, it reached nearly 1,000 kilometers in width, which is about 621 miles. Rather than a narrow channel, it formed a genuine ocean within a continent, creating thousands of kilometers of coastline and countless ecological opportunities. Its waters hosted an astonishing collection of animals. Mosasaurs hunted through open marine corridors. Long-necked plesiosaurs traveled between coastal environments and deeper waters. Enormous seabirds crossed above the waves. Beneath the surface, sharks occupied roles ranging from scavengers to apex predators. Yet the nature of shark evolution had changed since the distant Carboniferous world. Earlier chapters had produced anatomical experiments that seemed almost unconstrained. Strange fins, unusual spines, spiral jaws, and freshwater specialists appeared as evolution explored possibilities across a recovering planet. By the Cretaceous, a different pattern had emerged. The sharks of this age were not becoming stranger in appearance. They were becoming more specialized in function. Natural selection increasingly refined body plans toward particular ecological roles. Instead of producing radically unusual anatomies, it produced predators and hunters so precisely adapted to specific lifestyles that they approached the limits of what those lifestyles could become. Their bodies were not bizarre. Their effectiveness was. In this sense, the Cretaceous created a new kind of extreme. A shark optimized for one ecological role can achieve extraordinary success while conditions remain stable. Every aspect of its anatomy becomes tuned to a particular way of living. Feeding structures, swimming mechanics, sensory systems, growth patterns, and behavior gradually align toward the same objective. The result is efficiency of remarkable precision. Yet specialization carries a hidden cost. As adaptation narrows toward perfection within a specific niche, flexibility often declines. Opportunities outside that niche become harder to exploit. Environmental changes become more difficult to accommodate. What once represented evolutionary success can eventually become a constraint. The Western Interior Seaway became a stage upon which this principle unfolded repeatedly. Several shark lineages achieved extraordinary mastery within their chosen ecological roles. Each represented a different solution to survival within the same vast inland ocean. Their strategies differed dramatically, yet they shared a common destination. Evolution refined them until little room remained for further improvement within their respective niches. They approached ecological endpoints. Not endpoints because evolution stopped, but because each lineage had become so effective at a particular lifestyle that additional change offered diminishing returns. Their success reflected millions of years of refinement. Every generation contributed another small adjustment, another subtle improvement, another step toward specialization. Looking back across the Cretaceous, the most important lesson is not simply that these sharks flourished. It is that flourishing and vulnerability can emerge together. The ecosystems of the Western Interior Seaway supported some of the most specialized sharks ever produced. Their adaptations allowed them to dominate particular corners of the marine world with extraordinary efficiency. Yet, all of those lineages eventually vanished. The niches they occupied were so specific that no modern animal fully replaces them. Their disappearance left ecological spaces that remain only partially filled. The age that followed would reveal just how fragile even the most successful specializations could become when the world itself changed. Among the many predators moving through the Cretaceous seas, some pursued speed, others relied on stealth, sharp teeth, or powerful senses. Tychodus followed a different path. It became a specialist in prey that most hunters ignored, not because those animals lacked nutritional value, but because they were protected by defenses too formidable for ordinary jaws. The result was one of the most unusual giant sharks ever to live. The largest known species, Tychodus mortoni, reached lengths of approximately 10 meters, which is about 33 feet. This placed it among the largest sharks of the entire Cretaceous period. Yet a casual observer, looking only at its teeth, might never suspect such size. Unlike the blade-shaped dentition associated with many famous sharks, the teeth of Tychodus appear almost peaceful at first glance. Their true purpose reveals itself through closer examination. One of the discoveries that helped establish the immense size of Tychodus came from the Fort Hays limestone of Kansas. There, paleontologist Kenshu Shimada studied a remarkable jaw fossil embedded within a vertical rock face. The preserved jaw measured nearly 1 meter in length, which is about 3 feet. Across its surface lay hundreds of teeth arranged into tightly packed crushing plates. Rather than standing apart as individual weapons, the teeth formed an interlocking pavement designed to function as a unified crushing apparatus. Each tooth possessed a distinctive shape. There were no dagger points, no cutting edges, no serrations. Instead, the crowns were broad and flattened, their upper surfaces crossed by parallel ridges. These ridges were not decorative. They formed the core of the animal's feeding strategy. The name Tychodus translates as fold tooth, a direct reference to these structures. When smooth-shelled prey attempted to resist pressure, the ridges improved grip and prevented slipping. More importantly, they concentrated force along specific lines. Instead of spreading pressure evenly across a shell, the teeth directed it towards structural weaknesses. The process resembles the way a skilled engineer identifies stress points within a building, A shell that could withstand enormous force distributed across its surface might fracture when pressure focused upon the correct location. Through millions of years of refinement, Tychodus became exceptionally effective at exploiting this principle. The fossil record provides strong evidence regarding its preferred prey. Associated fossil assemblages contain remains of enormous inoceramid bivalves, animals whose shells could reach approximately 2 meters across, which is about 6.6 feet. Ammonites also appear among likely prey items. Sea turtles may have been targeted as well. These creatures carried protective armor, capable of frustrating many predators in the western interior seaway. For Tychodus, armor represented opportunity. Its feeding strategy opened access to food resources that existed in great abundance, yet remained inaccessible to most competitors. While other predators chased fish, reptiles, or cephalopods through open water, Tychodus specialized in processing some of the most heavily defended animals in its ecosystem. Its jaws functioned less like cutting instruments and more like biological crushing machinery. This specialization helped support remarkable success. At least 16 valid species of Tychodus have been identified. Fossils occur across the globe, appearing on every continent where marine sediments from the Cretaceous period are exposed. Such a distribution reflects a lineage capable of thriving across a wide range of environments while maintaining its distinctive ecological role. Yet, the same adaptations that enabled success may also have created vulnerability. Research suggests that Tychodus exhibited characteristics associated with what biologists describe as slow life history strategies. Growth occurred gradually. Sexual maturity was likely reached later in life. Reproduction probably produced relatively few offspring. These traits function effectively within stable ecosystems where environmental conditions remain predictable across generations. The Cretaceous oceans often provided precisely those conditions. Specialization flourished. Giant shell crushers prospered. Vast populations of armored prey supported equally impressive predators. For millions of years, the arrangement endured. What makes Tychodus remarkable is not merely its size, nor even its unusual teeth. It is the ecological role the animal occupied. No living shark approaches the same combination of body size, jaw architecture, and dietary focus. Modern oceans contain predators that crush shells and predators that grow large, but the immense shell processing specialist, represented by Tychodus, has no true counterpart. Its disappearance left behind more than an extinct species. It left behind an ecological profession that vanished with it, a way of making a living that the ocean has never fully rebuilt. Not every apex predator announces itself through unusual anatomy. Some become extraordinary through refinement. In the waters of the late Cretaceous, one shark embodied that principle with remarkable precision. Its body lacked the crushing pavement teeth of specialized shell breakers. It carried no bizarre spines, spirals, or experimental structures. Instead, nearly every aspect of its design converged toward a single purpose, pursuing large prey efficiently across open water. This was Cretoxorhina mantelli. Among paleontologists, it is sometimes called the Ginsu shark, a reference to the slicing effectiveness of its teeth. Adult individuals reached lengths of approximately 7 meters, which is about 23 feet. Large, powerful, and streamlined, it occupied a role that feels strikingly familiar to modern eyes. Yet familiarity should not obscure how formidable the animal truly was. The teeth reveal the first clue. Unlike the serrated blades associated with some later sharks, the teeth of Cretoxorhina possessed smooth cutting edges. They curved slightly backward and tapered to sharp points. At first glance, this might appear less efficient than a serrated design. In reality, the geometry served a different purpose. Serrations excel at sawing through resistant materials. Cretoxorhina specialized in something else. Its teeth were optimized for clean penetration and slicing through flesh during rapid attacks. The design suggests a predator built around speed and repeated strikes. Rather than overpowering prey through crushing force alone, it could deliver deep cutting wounds while maintaining momentum. In open water, where maneuverability and endurance often matter as much as raw strength, this approach offered considerable advantages. The fossil record preserves unusually direct evidence of how those advantages were used. In Kansas, paleontologists discovered the vertebral column of a mosasaur bearing Cretoxorhina teeth embedded between the vertebrae. The placement is revealing. These teeth were not lodged within soft tissues that happened to decay around them. They were associated directly with the spinal region. The attack appears focused upon a critical structural target rather than random flesh. Another discovery extends the picture even further. A tooth of Cretoxorhina was found inside the body cavity of a pteranodon. This great flying reptile spent much of its life above the sea, gliding across marine environments in search of food. Yet at least one individual ended its journey inside the stomach of a shark. Whether the animal was captured alive at the surface or scavenged after death remains uncertain. What is certain is that the boundary between sky and sea provided no guarantee of safety. Evidence of the shark itself is unusually complete. In the year 1890, fossil collector Charles Sternberg discovered a remarkably preserved skeleton in Kansas. It remains one of the most complete shark fossils from the Cretaceous period. The specimen provides rare insight into the overall body plan of a large predatory shark from this age. Its proportions reveal a streamlined form built for sustained movement. Particularly notable are the large pectoral fins, structures consistent with stability and efficient cruising across long distances. The ecosystem in which Cretoxorhina lived was crowded with giants. Tychodus processed heavily armored prey. Mosasaurs dominated portions of the marine reptile niche. Plesiosaurs occupied their own hunting strategies. Giant sea turtles navigated the seaway. Xiphactinus, reaching approximately 6 meters in length, which is about 19.7 feet, pursued prey as one of the largest predatory fishes of its era. No single species controlled the entire system. Instead, multiple apex predators coexisted, each exploiting different opportunities within the same vast marine world. Such arrangements are uncommon today, yet the western interior seaway supported them for millions of years. Then Cretoxorhina disappeared. Remarkably, its extinction occurred well before the famous asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs. Evidence suggests the species vanished approximately 72 million years ago, roughly 6 million years before that catastrophe. The exact cause remains uncertain. Long-term cooling trends during the late Cretaceous may have altered habitats and prey distributions. Ecological changes may have gradually undermined the conditions upon which the shark depended. Whatever the reason, the lineage ended. Its disappearance left behind more than an empty niche. The specific combination of speed, size, smooth-edged cutting teeth, and open ocean pursuit hunting vanished with it. For tens of millions of years afterward, no shark reconstructed the same design. The blueprint waited in silence within evolutionary possibility until a different family, in a different ocean, began building something strikingly similar from entirely separate origins. Before the impact itself, the world experienced an ordinary day. Waves crossed ancient shorelines. Plankton drifted through sunlit waters. predators followed familiar routes through seas that had existed, in one form or another, for millions of years. Nothing in the behavior of the ocean hinted that a chapter stretching back to the age of giant marine reptiles was approaching its final hours. Then, 66 million years ago, an object approximately 10 kilometers in diameter, which is about 6.2 miles, struck the region now known as the Yucatan Peninsula. It arrived at roughly 20 kilometers per second, which is about 12.4 miles per second. The energy released surpassed ordinary comprehension. Estimates place it near the equivalent of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. In geological terms, the event was instantaneous. A moment earlier, the impactor existed as a traveling fragment of the solar system. A moment later, entire ecosystems had begun unraveling. The first effects spread with astonishing speed. Shock waves radiated outward through the crust. Material blasted high above the atmosphere before falling back toward Earth. As fragments returned, they heated the skies across vast regions of the planet. Wildfires ignited over enormous distances. Forests burned. Coastlines changed. Ash and debris entered the atmosphere in quantities unmatched by any event within human experience. Yet the longer story unfolded not over hours, but over months. Dust, soot, and pulverized rock remained suspended high above the planet, reducing the sunlight reaching the surface. Daylight dimmed. The engines that powered countless food webs began to fail. Photosynthetic organisms, dependent upon light, declined. As these foundations weakened, consequences spread upward through every level of the ocean. Small organisms disappeared first. Animals that fed upon them followed. Larger predators soon faced shrinking prey populations. Entire ecological networks that had required millions of years to assemble began collapsing in sequence, link by link, across oceans that suddenly seemed unfamiliar even to their inhabitants. By the end of the crisis, approximately 76% of all species had vanished. The losses reshaped life on Earth. Non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. Pterosaurs vanished from the skies. Mosasaurs, which had dominated marine predator roles, were gone. Plesiosaurs joined them. Ammonites, survivors of multiple previous mass extinctions, finally reached the end of their immense evolutionary journey. For sharks, however, the outcome was strikingly different. The extinction remained severe, but far less devastating than earlier catastrophes they had endured. Fossil evidence suggests that approximately 30% of shark species disappeared. Compared with the overwhelming losses suffered by many other groups, sharks emerged from the event with much of their diversity intact. The contrast becomes even more remarkable when viewed against their deeper history. For hundreds of millions of years, sharks had survived repeated planetary crises. Some lineages vanished, others adapted. Again and again they persisted through environmental upheavals that erased entire branches of life. The impact at the end of the Cretaceous became another entry in that long record of endurance. The fossil sediments preserve subtle evidence of how the ocean changed afterward. Before the extinction event, deposits commonly contain roughly one shark denticle for every one fish tooth. The balance suggests sharks occupied a strong and widespread presence within marine ecosystems. After the impact, that relationship shifted dramatically. The record shows approximately one shark denticle for every 5 fish teeth. The ratio never fully returned to its previous state. Even survival carried consequences. Yet survival also created opportunity. With mosasaurs gone and plesiosaurs absent, ecological space opened across the oceans. Large predator roles that had once been shared among multiple groups suddenly stood vacant. Hunting grounds remained. Food sources persisted where conditions allowed. Entire categories of marine life awaited new occupants. Above approximately 3 meters in length, which is about 9.8 feet, vacancies appeared throughout marine ecosystems. The oceans had not become empty, but they had become available in ways unseen for millions of years. Sharks entered the new age carrying scars from the catastrophe, yet carrying possibility as well. They had survived their smallest proportional loss among the great mass extinctions of their history. Around them, the world was changing shape once more, and the waters left behind by the vanished giants were beginning to belong to something new. Long before the giant hunter itself appeared, the ocean began preparing a place for it. The Paleogene period stretched from approximately 66 million years ago until 23 million years ago. Across those vast spans of time, the seas entered a different chapter from the one that had preceded the Great Impact. Coastlines shifted. Shallow marine environments expanded and contracted. Temperatures generally remained favorable for diverse marine life. Most importantly, the dominant marine reptiles that had once shared the upper levels of the food web were gone. No mosasaurs patrolled the open water. No plesiosaurs cruised the continental shelves. The ancient rulers of the marine reptile world had vanished, leaving behind opportunities that remained unclaimed. Sharks survived the catastrophe and continued evolving, but the transformation that would eventually reshape the oceans came from an entirely different direction. Along the margins of shallow coastal waters in what is now Pakistan, a land mammal known as Pachycetus lived approximately 50 million years ago. It was not an ocean giant. It was not even fully aquatic. Roughly the size of a wolf, it walked on 4 legs and spent much of its life on land. Yet within its anatomy lay the earliest stages of one of the most remarkable transitions in the history of life. Generation after generation, descendants of similar animals became increasingly tied to water. Limbs adapted. Bodies changed shape. Movement through rivers, estuaries, and coastal seas became easier with each evolutionary step. What began as a terrestrial mammal slowly transformed into something capable of living almost entirely within the ocean. The pace of the change was extraordinary. Within roughly 15 million years of Pachycetus, fully aquatic whale lineages had spread throughout the world's oceans. Their bodies no longer resembled those of their distant land-dwelling ancestors. They traveled through open water with increasing efficiency, occupying ecological roles that had not existed before. As the Paleogene continued, whales diversified into many forms. Some remained relatively modest in size. Others gradually became larger. By the time the Oligocene approached its later stages, several lineages were beginning to reach dimensions that would fundamentally alter the structure of marine ecosystems. A new source of energy had entered the oceans. Large marine mammals represented concentrated stores of calories unlike anything available to earlier shark lineages. A giant predator requires an equally substantial food supply. Evolution cannot simply create enormous hunters in isolation. Every increase in predator size must be supported by an increase in available prey. The mathematics of survival imposes strict limits. A predator approaching 50 feet in length demands thousands of pounds of food over the course of a typical week. Such an animal cannot thrive in an environment lacking abundant large prey. Before giant whales became common, there was no stable foundation upon which such a predator could be built. As marine mammals expanded in both diversity and size, sharks responded. The lineage known as Otodus traces a gradual escalation that unfolded across tens of millions of years. Early forms, such as Ototus obliquus, appeared during the Paleocene. Later came Ototus auriculatus during the Eocene. Still later emerged Ototus angustidens during the Oligocene. Each species was impressive in its own time, yet viewed together, they resemble a sequence of stepping stones stretching across deep time. As marine mammals became more numerous and larger, these sharks followed a parallel trajectory. Bigger prey supported bigger predators. The relationship persisted generation after generation, linking the destinies of hunter and hunted. By approximately 23 million years ago, the Miocene began. Warm coastal waters extended across much of the globe. Marine mammal communities flourished. Nutrient-rich ecosystems supported immense populations of prey. The long rebuilding process that followed the end of the Cretaceous had finally produced an ocean richer than the one that came before. In those waters, on every continent except Antarctica, the culmination of 40 million years of escalation was already present. Megalodon did not appear as an accident. It emerged as the logical outcome of an ocean that had spent millions of years constructing the resources necessary to sustain it. The world created abundance on an unprecedented scale, and evolution answered with the largest predatory fish ever known. By the time Megalodon appeared, the story had already been unfolding for nearly 400 million years. Countless lineages had risen and disappeared. Strange experiments had emerged from ancient seas, flourished for a time, and vanished. Mass extinctions had erased entire worlds. Oceans had warmed, cooled, expanded, and retreated. Through all of it, sharks persisted, adapting again and again as the planet transformed around them. Megalodon stands at the far end of that immense narrative, not as an isolated marvel, but as the culmination of processes that had been shaping shark evolution since the earliest chapters of vertebrate life. Known scientifically as Ototus megalodon, it lived from approximately 23 million years ago until 3.6 million years ago. During that span, it became the largest predatory fish known from the fossil record. Its size remains the subject of ongoing refinement, yet the broad picture is remarkably consistent. Measurements based upon tooth proportions, vertebral dimensions, and body mass models place the largest individuals between 15 and 16 meters in length, which is about 49 to 52 feet. Some studies suggest exceptional animals may have approached 18 meters, which is about 59 feet. Regardless of which estimate ultimately proves closest to reality, no predatory fish, before or since, has approached the same scale. The jaws alone reveal part of the reason. Megalodon teeth reached extraordinary dimensions. Individual teeth could exceed 18 centimeters in height. The largest confirmed specimen measures 18.5 centimeters and was recovered from marine sediments in Peru. Broad, triangular, and heavily serrated, these teeth were not designed merely to cut flesh. They were engineered by evolution to penetrate dense bone, fracture rib structures, and remove large sections of tissue from animals that themselves ranked among the largest creatures in the sea. Behind those teeth stood a bite of astonishing power. Biomechanical models estimate bite forces reaching approximately 40,000 pounds, which is about 18,000 kilograms. Such values exceed those calculated for modern great white sharks by roughly an order of magnitude and represent the highest bite force estimates produced for any animal yet analyzed. Yet size and power alone do not explain the animal's success. The fossil record preserves clues about behavior as well. Whale bones, recovered from multiple locations, contain bite marks matching Megalodon dentition. The placement of these injuries is revealing. Large prey frequently shows damage concentrated around the chest region and the flippers. Rather than immediately attempting to consume a healthy whale, Megalodon appears to have targeted structures essential for movement and survival. A disabled whale becomes far easier to control than an uninjured one. Smaller prey required less preparation. For animals of modest size, evidence suggests direct engulfment and rapid consumption often replaced the more elaborate, disabling strategy used against giant marine mammals. Its geographic reach was equally remarkable. Megalodon fossils have been discovered on every continent except Antarctica. Teeth occur in coastal deposits and open ocean sediments alike. Warm marine environments across the globe supported populations of this immense predator. No other shark occupied the same role at comparable scale. For millions of years, it existed as a truly global apex hunter. Yet, even such success depended upon environmental conditions. The design of Megalodon was extraordinarily effective, but it was also closely tied to a particular version of the ocean. As global climates gradually cooled, shallow, warm seas contracted. The closure of the Central American Seaway altered major circulation patterns. Marine ecosystems reorganized. Whale populations increasingly shifted toward colder regions. These changes unfolded across immense spans of time, yet their cumulative effects were profound. Megalodon had evolved within warm waters rich in large marine mammals. The ecological foundation that supported its existence slowly weakened. The shark itself did not suddenly become less capable. Its teeth remained effective, its body remained powerful, its hunting strategy remained successful where suitable prey existed. What disappeared was the world that had made such an animal possible. That is why Megalodon represents more than a giant predator. Its fossil record preserves an unusually complete evolutionary story. Origin, expansion, dominance, and extinction can all be traced through the teeth scattered across ancient sediments. Within those remains lies the conclusion of a 400 million year journey, a predator shaped by oceans that spent tens of millions of years preparing for its arrival, even as those same oceans were already beginning to change beyond recognition. The clue arrived inside a cylinder of mud, not a fossil skeleton emerging from stone, nor a dramatic discovery exposed along a cliff face. No enormous tooth announced the mystery. No vanished predator left a spectacular monument behind. Instead, the evidence rested within layers of sediment gathered from the floor of the Pacific Ocean, compressed records of countless ordinary days settling one upon another across millions of years. In the year 2019, paleobiologist and oceanographer Elizabeth Sibbert received sediment core samples collected from the deep ocean. The work itself appeared routine. Such cores are among the most valuable archives available to scientists. Layer by layer, they preserve traces of ancient ecosystems. Deeper sediments correspond to older periods of time. Shallower sediments represent more recent ages. Together, they form a chronology, written not in words, but in particles. Within those layers were shark denticles. Unlike teeth, denticles are microscopic scales covering a shark's skin. Throughout their lives, sharks shed these structures into the surrounding water. Eventually, they drift downward and become incorporated into seafloor sediments. Fish leave behind traces as well, particularly teeth. Over immense spans of time, these tiny remains accumulate into a record of relative abundance. The process resembles counting leaves beneath a forest canopy. No individual leaf tells the story of the forest, yet enough leaves gathered over enough years begin to reveal patterns that would otherwise remain invisible. As Seibert examined the samples, a pattern emerged. From approximately 66 million years ago onward, the relationship between shark denticles and fish teeth remained remarkably consistent. Layer after layer told the same story. For roughly 47 million years, the ratio held near 1 shark denticle for every 5 fish teeth. Ecosystems changed, species appeared and disappeared, oceans shifted, yet the broad balance remained stable. Then something happened. At a sediment layer corresponding to approximately 19 million years ago, the pattern broke. The ratio did not drift gradually, it did not fluctuate before recovering, it collapsed. Above that boundary, the sediments contained roughly 1 shark denticle for every 100 fish teeth. Relative shark presence in the open ocean appears to have fallen by approximately 20 times. According to the available evidence, the transition occurred in less than 100,000 years and perhaps considerably faster. In geological terms, it was almost instantaneous. The scale of the decline becomes even more striking when compared with familiar extinction events. The asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs caused severe disruption across marine ecosystems, yet sharks lost approximately 30% of their diversity. Whatever occurred 19 million years ago appears to correspond with a collapse approaching 90% of open ocean shark populations. And yet almost nobody knew it had happened. The evidence was hidden inside microscopic fossils scattered through ancient mud. Earlier observations by Seibert had already pointed towards something unusual. Initial findings were published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. But understanding the full scope of the event required a more detailed investigation. Together with undergraduate researcher Leah Rubin, she undertook the painstaking task of examining nearly 1,300 fossil denticles. Each denticle carries subtle information about the shark that produced it. Shape, structure, and surface characteristics can reflect different ecological roles and evolutionary lineages. By sorting the denticles into distinct morphological categories, the researchers could estimate not only changes in abundance, but changes in diversity as well. The results deepened the mystery. Published in the journal Science during June of 2021, the analysis indicated that approximately 70% of denticle morphological types present before the event disappeared afterward. Entire forms vanished from the record. The loss extended beyond population decline into the erosion of ecological variety itself. Ordinarily, such a transformation would point toward a recognizable cause. A large asteroid impact leaves chemical signatures. Massive volcanic eruptions leave traces across the geological record. Severe climatic disruptions produce evidence preserved in sediments, fossils, and isotopic patterns. Around 19 million years ago, those signals are absent. No impact crater corresponds to the event. No volcanic catastrophe of sufficient scale appears at the right time. No known climate shift seems capable of explaining such a profound collapse. The surrounding geological record suggests relative stability. That contrast is what makes the discovery so unsettling. For nearly half of the Cenozoic era, the open ocean maintained a balance that endured through millions of years. Then, within a geological instant, most of its sharks disappeared. The sediments preserve the consequence with remarkable clarity. The cause remains hidden. The deepest loss was not measured in species. Species counts are often the numbers that attract attention. They are easy to visualize, easy to compare, and easy to place into charts. Yet the sediment cores from the Pacific Ocean revealed something more profound than a reduction in the number of sharks. They revealed a reduction in possibilities. Each denticle recovered from those ancient layers carries information about the animal that produced it. To the unaided eye, a denticle appears insignificant, little more than a microscopic fragment preserved in mud. Under magnification, however, patterns emerge. Ridges, grooves, angles, and geometric arrangements begin to reveal themselves. These structures are not random decorations. They are functional features shaped by evolution. Different denticle forms correspond to different solutions. Some possess long linear striations that reduce drag as water flows across the body. Such designs are associated with fast pelagic swimmers crossing immense distances through open water. Others display more complex geometric arrangements. Certain patterns appear linked to maneuverability. Others may reflect adaptations for deep environments. Some likely served functions that science has not yet fully understood. Each morphology represents a blueprint, a particular way of existing within the ocean, a particular collection of anatomical compromises and advantages refined over millions of years. This is why the findings from the sediment record are so significant. When approximately 70% of denticle morphologies disappeared around 19 million years ago, the event did not simply remove animals, it removed designs. Entire anatomical strategies vanished from the open ocean. More remarkable still, they never returned. In the layers above the extinction boundary, researchers do not observe a wave of new denticle forms replacing those that were lost. Shark populations recovered numerically from surviving lineages, but the missing morphologies remain absent. The ocean rebuilt itself, using what endured rather than inventing new versions of what had disappeared. The distinction is crucial. An ecosystem can recover population numbers while remaining permanently altered. A forest, regrown from a handful of surviving tree species, may once again appear lush, yet still lack many of the forms that once defined it. The same principle applies here. The post-extinction ocean contains sharks. What it does not contain is the extraordinary range of body plans that existed before the collapse. Particularly revealing is the fate of the more complex denticle designs. Geometric morphologies declined dramatically, and in many cases disappeared entirely. Simpler, linear forms became dominant. This pattern suggests that the extinction may have disproportionately affected highly specialized open ocean sharks, while allowing more generalized survivors to persist. The result resembles a pruning of evolutionary experimentation. Before the event, sediment samples contain representatives from more than 80 distinct morphological categories. Afterward, fewer than 30 remain. The reduction is not subtle. It is a fundamental restructuring of shark diversity at the anatomical level. Research published by the Yale team in the year 2021 highlighted another striking implication. Prior to the extinction, the oceans appear to have supported more than 10 times the morphological diversity found among sharks today. Not 10 times as many species, 10 times as many distinct approaches to being a shark. For an animal group with a history extending roughly 400 million years, that finding carries enormous weight. The modern ocean often appears rich in shark diversity, containing approximately 500 living species distributed across a wide variety of habitats. Yet compared with what existed before 19 million years ago, modern diversity may represent only a narrow subset of former possibilities. The world after the collapse is, in many respects, still our world. The broad structure established after that event remains recognizable today. Coastal generalists dominate. Open ocean specialists exist, but in reduced variety. The immense range of anatomical experimentation evident in the older sediments never reappears. 19 million years have passed. That interval exceeds the amount of time separating modern humans from the earliest stone tools by an almost unimaginable margin. Entire mountain ranges have changed, ocean currents have shifted, countless species have evolved and disappeared. The missing shark morphologies have not returned. Elizabeth Seibert once observed that sharks have survived 400 million years of planetary upheaval. They endured catastrophes that eliminated countless other groups. They passed through crises that reshaped the entire biosphere. Yet this event remains unresolved. Something removed much of the anatomical diversity of one of Earth's oldest surviving animal lineages. It happened rapidly. It left no obvious cause. And after 19 million years, the ocean still bears the imprint of that disappearance. Long before skeletons emerge from stone, and long before teeth catch the attention of collectors, another record settles patiently onto the seafloor. Grain by grain, layer by layer, the ocean stores fragments of lives that passed unnoticed while they were being lived. Among those fragments are dermal denticles, structures so small that most would escape detection without magnification, yet durable enough to persist through immense stretches of time. A single denticle is roughly the width of a human hair. Seen without specialized equipment, it appears insignificant. Under a microscope, however, its surface reveals intricate architecture. Ridges, grooves, angles, and textures become visible, each reflecting an evolutionary solution refined across countless generations. When Leah Rubin undertook the task of classifying the fossil denticles recovered from the Pacific sediment cores, the work demanded extraordinary patience. Nearly 1,300 specimens were examined and compared against catalogs derived from modern shark skin. Month after month, the collection was sorted into roughly 80 distinct morphological categories, transforming microscopic fragments into a map of vanished diversity. The value of denticles extends beyond their variety. Sharks lose teeth throughout their lives, but they shed denticles in far greater numbers. For every single tooth lost, approximately 100 denticles enter the environment. Over millions of years, this difference becomes profound. Teeth provide important clues, yet denticles accumulate in such abundance that they function as a far more sensitive instrument for tracking both population size and anatomical diversity through time. The mud remembers them in astonishing quantities. That abundance allowed researchers to detect patterns that would have remained invisible through teeth alone. The sediment cores central to the study were not collected from a single location. They came from two separate regions of the Pacific Ocean, one in the north and one in the south. Vast distances separated the sites. Different currents flowed through them. Different ecological communities occupied the surrounding waters. Yet, when the layers were examined, both cores revealed the same signal at the same moment in geological history. The collapse appeared in precisely the corresponding sediment layer. This agreement carries enormous significance. A local ecological disturbance might leave evidence in one region while leaving another untouched. A regional shift in ocean conditions might affect one basin more strongly than another. The identical pattern appearing in both locations points toward an event operating across a much larger scale, something capable of reshaping open ocean shark communities throughout immense portions of the planet. The numbers preserved in the sediments deepen that picture. Before the extinction event, roughly 1/3 of all examined sediment samples contained shark denticles. Afterward, fewer than 1/3 contained any shark evidence at all. The change reflects more than declining abundance. Entire windows of geological time appear in which sharks become absent from samples where they had once been regularly represented. The signal is not merely weaker, it becomes intermittently missing. Yet perhaps the most remarkable observation lies not in what vanished, but in what failed to appear afterward. Evolution often responds to ecological vacancies by generating new forms. Across Earth's history, lineages have repeatedly diversified into newly available niches. The post-extinction sediments tell a different story. New dentical morphologies do not emerge to replace those that disappeared. Surviving lineages expanded and rebuilt their populations, but the lost anatomical blueprints remained absent. The ocean recovered numerically while remaining diminished in possibility. What makes the discovery even more striking is its accidental nature. Elizabeth Sibbert was not searching for evidence of a previously unknown extinction. No hypothesis predicted a Miocene shark collapse. The unexpected pattern emerged from routine analysis, appearing first as a result that seemed inconsistent with everything known about shark resilience. And so the mud preserved a secret for 19 million years. It preserved traces of an ocean richer in forms than the one known today, an ocean whose diversity can now be glimpsed only through microscopic scales buried within ancient sediments. The fact that this event remained unnoticed until the year 2021 suggests a humbling possibility. Other stories of comparable scale may still rest within unopened core samples, waiting in research collections for someone to notice what the seafloor has remembered all along. The boundaries of extinction are rarely visible while they are happening. For most species, the final chapter does not arrive as a single dramatic moment. It unfolds across generations, through changes so gradual that no individual animal could recognize them. Shorelines shift, currents alter their paths, familiar migrations drift elsewhere. The world remains inhabited, yet the conditions that once sustained abundance begin to loosen, thread by thread. For Megalodon, that process appears to have unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years. By the late Pliocene, the ocean that had nurtured the largest predatory fish in Earth's history was changing in ways both subtle and profound. One of the most consequential transformations occurred not in the open sea but between two continents. As North America and South America became fully connected by land, the Central American Seaway closed. Around 3.5 million years ago, the final marine connection between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans was blocked. For millions of years before that closure, warm equatorial waters had circulated freely through the region. The flow helped distribute heat across vast areas of the planet. Once the passage disappeared, ocean circulation reorganized, currents shifted, climate patterns adjusted, global cooling strengthened. The consequences spread far beyond the narrow corridor where the waterway had once existed. Among the creatures most affected were the great baleen whales that formed the foundation of Megalodon's food supply. These animals did not vanish. Instead, many populations increasingly concentrated in colder waters and expanded their use of higher latitudes. Rich feeding grounds developed closer to polar regions, where seasonal productivity supported enormous gatherings of marine mammals. For a predator built around warm coastal ecosystems, this movement carried profound implications. Throughout its known history, Megalodon appears remarkably consistent in its ecological preferences. Isotopic studies examining teeth collected across its geographic range reveal a stable warm water signature. Whether inhabiting ancient coastlines of the Atlantic, Pacific, or Indian Oceans, the species maintained similar dietary patterns and environmental associations. Researchers have found little evidence that it adapted toward cooler water prey as conditions changed. The giant hunter remained tied to the world that had shaped it. At nearly the same time, another shark lineage was expanding its influence. Great white sharks were smaller, more flexible, and capable of exploiting a wider range of environments. Research published during the year 2022 suggested that these sharks may have competed directly with juvenile megalodons for prey resources. The interaction was not a contest of direct confrontation. A mature megalodon dwarfed any great white shark. The pressure emerged through overlap. As prey distributions shifted, adaptable competitors could follow opportunities into changing habitats. Juvenile megalodons, dependent upon many of the same food resources during early life stages, may have encountered increasing competition at precisely the moment environmental conditions were becoming less favorable. The challenge was amplified by the biology of the giant shark itself. Like other large marine specialists before it, Megalodon followed a strategy centered on slow growth and limited reproduction. Individuals required decades to reach maturity. Females produced relatively small numbers of offspring. Nursery grounds occupied specific shallow coastal regions where young animals could develop with some protection from larger predators. Such a strategy functions exceptionally well in stable environments. When resources remain abundant and predictable, survival rates compensate for low reproductive output. When conditions deteriorate across generations, recovery becomes far more difficult. Population declines cannot be rapidly reversed because new individuals enter the breeding population only after many years. Over time, the pressures accumulated. The warming seas that had once stretched broadly across lower latitudes contracted. Whale populations redistributed. Ocean circulation transformed. Competition intensified. None of these developments alone appears sufficient to explain extinction. Together, they formed a narrowing corridor through which an increasingly specialized predator struggled to pass. The youngest confirmed megalodon fossils date to approximately 3.6 million years ago. Younger claims have been proposed, yet none have achieved broad, independent verification. By then, the ocean that had made Megalodon possible no longer existed in its previous form. The animal itself remained magnificent to the end. Its teeth, body design, and hunting abilities had not suddenly failed. Rather, the environmental tapestry that supported those traits was gradually rewoven into something different. Over roughly 1 million years, the world changed around a predator perfected for another age, and perfection offered no protection from change. Across the modern ocean, sharks appear in forms so varied that it is easy to mistake abundance for completeness. They patrol coral reefs, wander continental shelves, cross entire ocean basins, and descend into depths where sunlight never reaches. Around 500 described species survive today, occupying habitats on nearly every coastline and throughout much of the open sea. At first glance, such diversity seems to tell a story of success. Yet, the sediments have altered that perspective. Those tiny records buried beneath the Pacific reveal that the sharks of the present are not the full expression of what the group once achieved. They are the inheritors of a lineage repeatedly narrowed by catastrophe, survivors of extinctions that removed entire branches of possibility. What remains is impressive, but it is also selective. The modern ocean contains the descendants of forms resilient enough to endure when others vanished. The pattern becomes clearer when examining where today's diversity is concentrated. Most living shark species inhabit coastal and nearshore environments. Coral reefs, estuaries, continental shelves, and shallow marine ecosystems support a remarkable variety of body shapes and lifestyles. By contrast, the open ocean contains far fewer forms. The difference aligns strikingly with the evidence from the extinction approximately 19 million years ago, when the most severe losses appear to have occurred among pelagic lineages living far from shore. Coastal survivors rebuilt populations and diversified, while much of the lost open ocean experimentation never returned. Among the most famous of those survivors is the great white shark. Popular culture often presents the great white as a smaller descendant of Megalodon, a lingering remnant of the giant predator that once dominated warm seas. The fossil record tells a different story. Great white sharks belong to a separate family known as Lamnidae. Their evolutionary path diverged from the lineage leading to Megalodon tens of millions of years before either species reached prominence. Similarities between the two arose independently. Large size, streamlined bodies, powerful jaws, and active predatory lifestyles emerged through convergent evolution, shaped by comparable ecological pressures rather than close ancestry. Another lineage followed a very different path. Hammerhead sharks are among the most distinctive animals in the ocean, their broad cephalofoil heads creating silhouettes unlike those of any other shark. Fossil evidence suggests that the earliest hammerheads appeared approximately 20 million years ago. They emerged shortly before the mysterious extinction that transformed pelagic shark diversity. While many lineages disappeared or declined, hammerheads endured. In the millions of years that followed, they became one of the most successful and varied shark groups in the world, diversifying within an ocean already thinned by earlier losses. Elsewhere swims a giant, representing an entirely different strategy. The whale shark, reaching lengths of up to 12 meters, which is about 39.4 miles, stands as the largest fish alive today. Despite its immense size, it feeds primarily on plankton and other tiny organisms filtered from the water. In ecological terms, it occupies nearly the opposite position from Megalodon. One depended upon massive prey and powerful predation, while the other harvests countless small organisms drifting through productive seas. Yet beneath those differences lies a familiar framework. The basic shark body plan established hundreds of millions of years ago remains visible within both. Speed finds its modern expression in the short fin mako. Capable of reaching approximately 45 kilometers per hour, which is about 28 miles per hour, it is widely regarded as the fastest living shark. Its streamlined form and pursuit-based hunting strategy make it the closest living analog to the ancient predator Cretoxorhina. The resemblance is striking not because of direct descent, but because evolution arrived independently at a similar solution long after Cretoxorhina disappeared. Comparable ecological demands produced comparable outcomes across vast spans of time. Taken together, these animals reveal a common theme. They are not descendants of the most extreme Carboniferous experiments, nor direct continuations of many vanished Cretaceous specialists. Instead, they belong to lineages that persisted through repeated planetary upheavals. Their histories are stories of adaptability, flexibility, and endurance. The modern shark fauna is therefore not a museum preserving every ancient possibility. It is a distilled collection of survivors, shaped less by the pursuit of extremity than by the capacity to remain when the ocean changed around them. Some of the most important creatures in this story are known only through fragments smaller than a grain of rice. By the time the mysterious extinction approximately 19 million years ago erased much of the open ocean's shark diversity, countless lineages had already disappeared without leaving complete bodies behind. The denticles recovered from ancient sediments reveal that roughly 70% of known morphological types vanished during that event. Yet for many of those forms, the denticles themselves are all that remain. No skeleton accompanies them. No jaw rests nearby. No distinctive teeth provide clues about feeding behavior. There are no complete outlines preserved in stone, no impressions revealing the shape of fins, and no fossilized remains capable of showing how these animals moved through the water. The tiny scales tell us that something existed, but they do not tell us exactly what that something was. A denticle can reveal remarkable information. Its ridges may suggest how water flowed across the body. Its geometry may hint at speed, maneuverability, depth preference, or ecological role. Yet even the most informative denticle remains only a small piece of a much larger puzzle. Looking at one is a little like discovering a single feather and attempting to reconstruct an entire bird. Certain conclusions are possible. Many others remain beyond reach. This limitation extends far beyond the extinction itself. Sharks have always presented a special challenge to paleontology because their skeletons are composed primarily of cartilage rather than dense bone. Cartilage performs beautifully in life. It creates strong, flexible bodies capable of extraordinary movement. After death, however, it rarely survives long enough to become fossilized. Teeth and denticles endure far more readily than the rest of the animal. As a result, much of shark history is preserved as scattered pieces rather than complete organisms. For every shark species recognized from the fossil record, paleontologists suspect that additional species likely existed and vanished without leaving sufficient evidence for identification. Some inhabited environments unfavorable to fossilization. Others may have died in places where their remains were quickly destroyed. Still others may have left fossils that remain buried, undiscovered, or impossible to recognize with current knowledge. The effect compounds across time. The broad narrative reconstructed from fossils often appears expansive. It contains ancient experiments, specialized predators, global extinctions, and astonishing evolutionary transformations. Yet every chapter is filtered through preservation. Every discovery represents only the fraction of history fortunate enough to survive the journey from living organism to fossil specimen. Even the extraordinary diversity revealed by the sediment cores must therefore be understood as incomplete. The Carboniferous oceans almost certainly contained more forms than the record presently captures. The specialized sharks of later eras likely existed in greater variety than surviving fossils suggest. The extinction that transformed shark diversity 19 million years ago may have removed lineages for which no recognizable body fossils have ever been found. Entire anatomical strategies could have appeared and disappeared without leaving evidence beyond microscopic traces. Some animals may never be reconstructed at all. Their bodies dissolved. Their teeth were never preserved. Their habitats erased the evidence of their existence almost as quickly as life itself ended. What remains are gaps, subtle absences in ecosystems, evolutionary spaces that appear to have once been occupied by something now permanently beyond observation. This is perhaps the deepest challenge facing paleontology. The fossil record is not a complete archive of life. It is a collection assembled by chance, chemistry, geology, and time. Preservation was never designed to create a faithful inventory of the past. It captures fragments while allowing countless other stories to disappear. For sharks, that challenge becomes even greater. Their history stretches across roughly 450 million years, yet much of it survives only in isolated teeth, scattered denticles, and rare moments of exceptional preservation. The story we can tell is vast. The story that has been lost is almost certainly larger still. The inheritance of sharks is written not only in fossils, but in living bodies moving through the oceans today. Each surviving species carries solutions refined across approximately 450 million years of uninterrupted evolutionary testing. Continents shifted, climates transformed, and entire ecosystems vanished, yet certain biological systems endured, adjusted, and improved through every upheaval. Modern sharks are therefore more than survivors. They are living archives, preserving innovations whose origins reach so deeply into Earth's past that they predate forests, flowering plants, and most familiar forms of animal life. Among the most remarkable of these inheritances are the ampullae of Lorenzini. Distributed across the snout as tiny sensory structures filled with conductive gel, these organs allow sharks to perceive electrical fields of extraordinary weakness. A concealed fish resting beneath sediment cannot hide the faint electrical activity produced by muscle contractions and heartbeats. Even when sight provides no information and movement has ceased entirely, the shark remains aware of the animal's presence. The sensitivity involved is astonishing. These receptors can detect electric fields as weak as approximately 1/1000th of a volt, revealing signals so subtle that they seem almost beyond perception. Their usefulness extends beyond hunting. Evidence suggests that sharks can also use these systems to interpret variations in Earth's magnetic field while navigating across vast distances. Long migrations spanning thousands of kilometers, which is about 621 miles, may be aided by sensory mechanisms that transform the planet itself into a navigational reference. Decades of scientific investigation have explored these abilities, yet human technology still struggles to reproduce comparable sensitivity in compact biological form. Another inheritance covers nearly every surface of the shark's body. The skin of a shark does not resemble smooth rubber or polished leather. Under magnification, it appears as a landscape of microscopic denticles, each arranged according to patterns refined through immense stretches of evolutionary time. These structures influence how water flows across the animal, reducing drag and improving hydrodynamic efficiency. Engineers studying aircraft and underwater vehicles have examined these surfaces closely, seeking to understand the principles hidden within their geometry. What makes the comparison remarkable is not merely that nature arrived at an effective solution first, it is that certain dentical arrangements continue to perform with an efficiency that remains difficult to surpass. The patterns surviving on modern sharks are the products of millions upon millions of years of refinement conducted by natural selection alone. Deep within the body, another mystery persists. Large sharks, such as the great white shark, display unusual resistance to infection and certain forms of cellular damage. Researchers investigating cancer biology and immune function have long been interested in these characteristics. The details remain incompletely understood, yet the broader significance is clear. Every adaptation preserved within living sharks represents biological information shaped through immense spans of time. Some of those solutions may eventually illuminate new possibilities in human medicine. Their relationship with rest offers another reminder of how differently these animals experience the world. Many shark species do not sleep in the conventional manner familiar to mammals. Some maintain continuous motion, allowing oxygen-rich water to pass across their gills as they travel. Others enter states of reduced activity while still sustaining respiration through alternative mechanisms. The details vary among species, yet the underlying respiratory systems trace their origins to ancient ancestors that swam through oceans unimaginably distant in time. Along the length of the body, runs yet another sensory network. Known as the lateral line system, it consists of specialized cells capable of detecting subtle pressure changes and water displacement. A swimming fish, a struggling animal, or even a distant movement can generate information carried through surrounding water. The shark perceives these disturbances without relying upon sight, smell, or sound in the conventional sense. In darkness, within murky conditions, or beyond direct visual range, the system continues to provide a detailed picture of nearby activity. Taken together, these features reveal something profound. The sharks alive today are not diminished remnants of a greater past. They are the distilled products of every refinement that survived every extinction, every environmental transformation, and every evolutionary reset. Within their senses, skin, physiology, and behavior remain solutions so effective that, in some cases, human technology still studies them not as curiosities, but as benchmarks. There is a peculiar contrast in the modern ocean. The waters covering Earth today appear familiar, filled with lineages whose ancestry stretches back through ages of continental drift, mass extinction, and planetary transformation. Sharks still cross open seas. They still patrol reefs and coastlines. They still carry sensory systems refined across hundreds of millions of years. Yet, measured against the immense span of their history, the present ocean contains fewer sharks than at almost any point during the last 400 million years. What makes this moment unusual is not simply the decline itself. Throughout their history, sharks endured catastrophes driven by forces far beyond the influence of any living creature. Asteroid impacts altered entire ecosystems. Volcanic eruptions transformed climates. Shifting oceans reorganized food webs on a planetary scale. Each crisis emerged from geology, astronomy, or environmental change. The pressures were immense, but they were indifferent. The present decline follows a different pattern. Every year, approximately 100 million sharks are killed through human fishing activity. Some are targeted directly. Others become unintended bycatch in fisheries pursuing different species. Many enter a global trade that values only portions of the animal, while the rest is discarded. Across coastlines and open oceans alike, the cumulative effect has become visible in population surveys from nearly every major marine region. The scalloped hammerhead offers a striking example. Its distinctive head shape represents one of the most successful evolutionary experiments to emerge from the survivors of earlier extinctions. Ancestors of this lineage persisted through the catastrophe that ended the age of dinosaurs. Their relatives survived the Great Dying, when the overwhelming majority of marine life disappeared. They endured the mysterious extinction approximately 19 million years ago that erased much of the ocean's shark diversity. Yet, within little more than a human lifetime, scalloped hammerhead populations have declined by more than 95% in many parts of their range. Today, the species is listed as critically endangered. The story repeats elsewhere. The oceanic white-tip shark was once so common across tropical seas that explorer Jacques Cousteau described it as the most abundant large animal on Earth. For generations of sailors and researchers, encounters were routine. Now, in regions such as the Gulf of Mexico, populations have fallen by approximately 98% since the middle of the 20th century. Vast stretches of ocean that once supported enormous numbers now contain only remnants of those earlier populations. The short-fin mako faces a similar challenge. Its biology reflects a strategy that has appeared repeatedly throughout this story. Individuals mature slowly, reproduction produces relatively small numbers of offspring. Many years are required before a young shark contributes to the next generation. Such characteristics work effectively in stable environments where survival rates remain high. They become liabilities when mortality rises rapidly. The same broad pattern that limited the recovery potential of giant extinct specialists now constrains modern species struggling against sustained population decline. The lesson from the extinction approximately 19 million years ago lingers beneath these trends. When shark diversity collapsed during that ancient event, the losses did not simply reverse once conditions stabilized. Entire anatomical pathways disappeared. Evolution rebuilt populations from surviving lineages, but it did not recreate the vanished designs. The missing forms remained absent for millions of years. Innovation operates on timescales far longer than destruction. That reality gives modern declines unusual weight. If lineages disappear today, replacement is unlikely within any timescale relevant to human civilization. The ocean can recover abundance under favorable conditions, but the restoration of lost evolutionary history is another matter entirely. Across 400 million years, every previous restructuring of shark diversity was caused by forces incapable of intention. Asteroids did not choose their trajectories. Continents did not choose their movements. Volcanoes did not choose their eruptions. The present chapter is different. For the first time in the long history of sharks, the dominant force shaping their future is also capable of understanding the consequences of its actions. At first glance, the history of sharks appears to be a story about strength. Again and again, across the immense span of geological time, certain forms rose above all others. They became larger, faster, more specialized, or more efficient than anything that had existed before. Their bodies seemed perfectly matched to the worlds they inhabited. Every feature carried the appearance of refinement, pushed toward its highest expression. Yet when those ancient oceans are viewed together, a different pattern begins to emerge, one that runs beneath the individual stories like a current connecting distant shores. The most extraordinary sharks were often the most vulnerable, not because they were weak, but because they were exceptionally well suited to a specific set of conditions. Consider Edestus, whose broad, crushing teeth transformed hard-shelled prey into a reliable source of food. Across millions of years, natural selection refined this approach with remarkable precision. The shark became one of the greatest shell crushers the oceans had ever produced. Its success depended upon an environment rich in exactly the creatures it had evolved to consume. As long as that world endured, the strategy worked brilliantly. When the western interior seaway disappeared and marine communities reorganized, the very adaptation that had once guaranteed success became a constraint from which there was little escape. A similar story unfolded in the strange anatomy of Helicoprion. Its spiral tooth structure represented a solution unlike anything seen before or since. For generations, researchers struggled to understand how it functioned, yet the evidence now suggests a predator highly adapted to capturing soft-bodied cephalopods that flourished in ancient seas. Through countless generations, its body became increasingly aligned with that ecological role. Then came the Great Dying. Ocean chemistry shifted. Food webs collapsed. Entire categories of marine life disappeared. In a transformed world, such specialization offered little room for adjustment. The design was not inadequate. It was simply tailored to a reality that no longer existed. The same principle can be traced through the history of Cretoxyrhina. For millions of years, it occupied the role of apex predator in warm Cretaceous seas. Speed, size, and predatory efficiency combined into an animal superbly adapted to its environment. Yet evidence suggests that its decline may have begun before the asteroid impact that later marked the end of the age. Long-term cooling trends were already altering the oceans. Conditions gradually drifted away from those that had favored its success. Even before catastrophe arrived, the foundations supporting its ecological position were beginning to weaken. Then came Megalodon, perhaps the clearest example of all. For approximately 20 million years, it dominated warm oceans across the planet. Its size surpassed every predatory fish known from the fossil record. Its feeding strategy was devastatingly effective. Its distribution stretched across enormous distances. Yet the forces that ended its reign were not dramatic predators, novel diseases, or sudden competition. Instead, shifting currents redirected warm water. Whale populations altered their migrations. Coastal nursery habitats changed. The conditions that had supported Megalodon's way of life slowly moved beyond reach. The animal remained magnificent. The world around it became different. Against this backdrop, the persistence of more flexible lineages becomes easier to understand. Sharks with broader diets could exploit changing food sources. Species capable of tolerating wider environmental conditions could move when habitats shifted. Faster reproductive cycles allowed populations to recover from losses that would overwhelm slower breeders. Flexibility lacked the grandeur of extreme specialization, yet it repeatedly provided resilience when oceans entered periods of upheaval. Across approximately 450 million years of evidence, evolution reveals the same lesson with remarkable consistency. Extraordinary adaptation creates extraordinary success, but it also creates dependence. The more perfectly a design matches its moment, the more deeply its fate becomes tied to the continuation of that moment. When circumstances remain favorable, specialization can produce wonders. When circumstances change, those same refinements can become limitations. This is not a failure of evolution. It is simply the nature of a process that does not build for permanence. The ocean shapes life for the conditions that exist now, and every masterpiece it creates remains, in some measure, a reflection of a particular world passing through time. The deeper this journey travels into the history of sharks, the more it challenges a common assumption about extinction. There is a tendency to imagine vanished animals as failures, as if disappearance itself proves inferiority. In this view, species that survive are somehow better, while those that vanish are treated as unsuccessful attempts along a path leading toward the present. Yet the fossil record tells a far more intricate story, one that resists such simple conclusions. The oceans of the distant past were not workshops producing unfinished prototypes. They were complete worlds populated by complete creatures, each shaped by the conditions surrounding them. Every successful lineage represented a solution to a particular set of ecological challenges. Survival depended not on approaching some future ideal, but on functioning effectively within the realities of the moment. The strange sharks of the Carboniferous period illustrate this beautifully. They are often described as bizarre because they differ so dramatically from the forms familiar today. Yet unfamiliarity should not be mistaken for inadequacy. These animals persisted for immense spans of time, often across millions of years. Their anatomies were refined through countless generations, adjusted by natural selection with the same relentless precision that shaped modern species. Consider Orthacanthus. Its distinctive dorsal structure, resembling an anvil resting upon its back, appears almost surreal when viewed through modern expectations. Yet this feature was not an accident. It evolved, persisted, and spread because it served a purpose within the environment that produced it. Whatever social, defensive, or reproductive role it performed, it functioned effectively enough to remain part of the species across long stretches of geological time. Orthacanthus was not moving toward the form of a modern shark. It had already become exactly what its own world required. The same can be said of Helicoprion. Its extraordinary spiral arrangement of teeth puzzled researchers for generations. Entire museums displayed reconstructions that later proved incorrect. Only after decades of study did a clearer picture emerge of how the structure operated. Yet throughout all that scientific uncertainty, one fact remained unchanged. Helicoprion thrived. It occupied the open ocean for approximately 65 million years, a duration longer than the entire age of mammals. A feeding mechanism that endured for so long cannot reasonably be described as a failed experiment. It was an exceptionally successful solution to the ecological circumstances in which it evolved. Other examples drift through the fossil record, like fragments of forgotten worlds. The scissor-like jaws of Edestus, the cephalic spine carried by Falcatus, the freshwater dominion occupied by Orthacanthus. Each represented a distinctive answer to challenges that existed within ancient environments. None were mistakes waiting to be corrected. None were stepping stones leading inevitably toward modern forms. They were destinations in their own right. What disappeared was not superiority being replaced by something greater. More often, the disappearance reflected the loss of the circumstances that had once made those adaptations valuable. When habitats vanished, food webs reorganized, or climates shifted, the questions posed by the environment changed as well. The solutions tied to those earlier questions lost their relevance, not because they became worse, but because the context that had given them meaning no longer existed. Seen from this perspective, extinction takes on a different character. The ocean did not necessarily improve when many of these lineages vanished. It did not progress toward a higher state. In many respects, it narrowed. Entire categories of biological possibility disappeared. Forms that had once contributed to the richness of marine life ceased to exist. The surviving world remained complex and vibrant, but it became a different kind of complexity, shaped by the particular branches that endured while others were cut away. What was lost, therefore, was not failure. It was possibility. The ancient sharks that vanished were every bit as complete as the species swimming today. Their disappearance reflects the passing of worlds as much as the passing of animals. The environments that shaped them faded from existence, and the creatures built for those environments faded with them. In the long history of the oceans, the two departures were inseparable, carried away together into the depths of time. The phrase at the center of this story is not a metaphor. It is not an exaggeration, nor a poetic simplification designed to make an ancient history feel more dramatic. When the fossil record is followed across the immense span of shark evolution, the pattern that emerges is remarkably literal. Again and again, the oceans experienced moments when accumulated diversity was swept away, when entire categories of life vanished, and when evolution was forced to begin building from what little remained. The first of these great restarts arrived near the end of the Devonian period. For tens of millions of years, armored placoderms had dominated marine ecosystems. Their presence shaped the evolutionary pressures surrounding early sharks, influencing competition, predation, and ecological opportunity. Then, the late Devonian extinction transformed the oceans. Many of the dominant lineages disappeared. An ecological space opened on a scale rarely seen before. Into that newly available world, came an explosion of shark diversity. The Carboniferous seas filled with forms unlike anything before them, animals carrying spiraled teeth, unusual fins, elongated bodies, and anatomical structures that seem almost dreamlike when viewed from the present. The ocean had not merely changed. It had begun again from altered foundations. That extraordinary age eventually ended as well. The Great Dying erased the overwhelming majority of marine life and permanently removed the strange giants and specialists that had flourished throughout the Carboniferous world. Entire branches of evolutionary history vanished. The ecosystems that emerged afterward were built from survivors rather than rulers. New shark lineages spread through the recovering seas, carrying body plans that emphasized flexibility, adaptability, and persistence. The creatures that inherited the aftermath were not improved versions of what came before. They were responses to a different world, shaped by different constraints and opportunities. Much later, another transformation arrived. The impact that ended the Cretaceous period altered marine ecosystems across the planet. Ancient reptilian predators disappeared. Long-established food webs fractured. Specialist sharks tied to that vanished environment faded from the record alongside many of the conditions that had supported them. The disappearance of forms such as Tychodus and Cretoxorhina was part of a broader ecological restructuring whose effects extended far beyond any single lineage. Once again, what followed was not a continuation of the previous ocean. It was a rebuilding. From those altered seas emerged the Paleogene world, and eventually the conditions that allowed Megalodon to rise. Yet perhaps the most surprising restart occurred far more recently. Approximately 19 million years ago, something reduced open ocean shark diversity on a scale that remained unnoticed until careful examination of sediment records revealed the pattern. There was no obvious asteroid, no known catastrophe announcing itself in layers of global devastation. The oceans appeared relatively stable. Nevertheless, roughly 90% of open ocean shark diversity disappeared in a geological instant. Entire categories of anatomical variation vanished. The ocean that followed was reconstructed from survivors living primarily in coastal environments. In many respects, the marine world familiar today emerged from that largely hidden turning point. Seen together, these events reveal a recurring rhythm. Each restart involved irreversible loss. Body plans vanished. Ecological strategies disappeared. Evolutionary pathways, developed across immense spans of time, came to abrupt ends. No later lineage recreated them exactly. What was erased remained erased. Yet every ending also created opportunity. Vacant ecological space invited new adaptations. Survivors expanded into unfamiliar roles. Novel forms emerged from the remnants of older worlds. The oceans repeatedly demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to generate fresh solutions from diminished beginnings. The sea possesses no memory in the human sense. It does not preserve favorites, nor does it mourn the disappearance of remarkable designs. It works only with what remains after change has passed through. From those remnants, it builds again, producing outcomes that could not have been predicted by the creatures that came before. And across 450 million years of shark history, that process has repeated often enough that the conclusion becomes unavoidable. Evolution did not start over once. It started over many times. A single shark moves through the open ocean tonight, unseen beneath a ceiling of waves reflecting distant starlight. It is one animal among many, yet it carries within its body a history so vast that ordinary measures of time become difficult to grasp. Long before the first forests spread across continents, long before birds crossed the sky, long before mammals inherited a world transformed by extinction. Ancestors of that shark were already learning how to survive in changing seas. The ocean surrounding it may appear familiar, but compared with much of its history, it is a remarkably reduced place. There are fewer apex predators now, fewer evolutionary experiments, fewer anatomical blueprints moving through open water than existed across much of the last 400 million years. Entire categories of sharks have vanished. Ancient specialists disappeared. Strange body plans ended. Ecological roles that once shaped marine ecosystems faded from existence. The ocean inherited by the present is not the fullest version of itself. It is what remained after countless episodes of loss. And yet, the survivors remain extraordinary. Somewhere across the Pacific, a short-fin mako slices through open water at approximately 45 kilometers per hour, which is about 28 miles per hour. Electrical signals ripple outward from every living creature around it. Minute pressure disturbances spread through the surrounding sea. The shark interprets information carried by senses refined across hundreds of millions of years. Its electroreceptors detect biological activity hidden from sight. Its lateral line perceives movements beyond visual range. Within that streamlined body operates sensory technology whose origins stretch back beyond the first tree ever to grow upon land. Elsewhere, far below the surface, another lineage continues its ancient journey. A six-gill shark descends through approximately 2,000 meters, which is about 1,243 miles, of darkness. Its appearance would not seem entirely foreign to an observer transported from the Jurassic period. Across immense spans of evolutionary time, the basic design changed comparatively little. The animal remains a living document of endurance, carrying anatomical solutions that survived every extinction, every climatic shift, and every restructuring of the marine world. Generation after generation passed through catastrophes that erased countless contemporaries, while this lineage persisted. Not every story reached the present. The spiral jaw of Helicoprion now rests as stone preserved within museum collections. Its remarkable arrangement of approximately 180 teeth remains among the most distinctive feeding structures ever produced by a vertebrate. For approximately 65 million years, it functioned effectively in oceans that no longer exist. Then both the environment and the animal vanished together, leaving only fossils to suggest how successful the design once was. The unusual dorsal structure of Orthacanthus survives only as impressions within ancient rock. Its purpose remains debated. The animal that carried it disappeared approximately 300 million years ago. Whatever challenge that structure addressed belongs to a vanished ecological conversation. The question endured in stone. The living answer did not. Even more elusive are the lost inhabitants revealed only through microscopic traces. Tiny denticles preserved within Pacific sediments record animals whose names remain unknown. Their bodies dissolved, their skeletons vanished, their shapes cannot be reconstructed with confidence. Yet the sediment remembers that they existed. It preserves evidence that entire forms of shark diversity once moved through ancient seas before disappearing in an extinction whose cause remains unresolved. The ocean experienced many versions of itself. The world observed today is only one outcome among countless possibilities that once existed. The fossil record serves as a catalog of alternatives, documenting lineages that flourished, transformed, and vanished across approximately 450 million years. Again and again, life expanded into new forms. Again and again, change swept many of those forms away. The process never truly ended. It simply continued under new conditions. The sharks alive tonight are not the conclusion of that history. They are the latest inheritance of a story shaped by persistence, loss, adaptation, and renewal. They move through an ocean still changing, carrying within their bodies the surviving fragments of worlds that came before, enduring representatives of whatever remained after the last great reset.